Hello everyone, myself Shweta Kaur and today's my topic is muscle spindle and Golgi tendon organ. So now we start with the muscle spindle. The muscle spindle are named because of their long spindle fusiform shape. They are basically stretch receptor and skeletal muscle. They are responsible for stretch reflex. A bunch of intrafusal fibers are known as muscle spindle. Responsible for proprioceptive mechanism. How do it can play role in proprioceptive mechanism? It can play a role in proprioception through the change in muscle length. Second is structure of muscle spindle. Muscle spindle contain 3 to 12 small intrafusal fibers encapsulated in a capsule containing fluid present in between and parallel to the extrafusal fiber and their ends attached to endomysium of extrafusal fibers, as we see in this diagram. So these are the extrafusal fibers, as you see, and in between the extrafusal muscle fiber there is intrafusal muscle fibers. So the intrafusal muscle fibers present in the parallelly with the extrafusal muscle fibers. And the motor innervation of extrafusal muscle fiber is alpha motor neuron and the intrafusal muscle fiber is gamma motor neuron. Now next is type of intrafusal fibers. They have two types. First is nuclear bag fiber and second is nuclear chain fiber. Nuclear bag fibers, 1 to 3 nuclear bag fibers present in each spindle, dilated at the center to form a bag-like structure that contains multiple nuclei. Second is nuclear chain fiber. They are 3 to 9 in number in each spindle. The nuclei is these fibers are arranged in row in the form of chain. Nuclear bag fiber are longer and larger in diameter than nuclear chain fibers. The peripheral part of intrafusal fibers have contractile function and non-contractile center portion is stretched. Why the center portion is non-contractile? Because there is a absence of contractile protein, actin and myosin. Now the innervation of muscle spindle. First is efferent innervation, sensory fibers. Sensory fibers are two types, group 1A and type 2. Two types of sensory ending, primary ending and secondary ending. Primary ending is also known as annulospiral ending. The terminals of type 1A fiber spirally around the center of nuclear bag fiber and nuclear chain fiber. The secondary endings are also known as flower spray endings. Terminals of type 2 fibers usually present on the nuclear chain fiber loaded in paracentral part of the spindle. So now we just, as you see in this diagram taken from the Guyton, there is a nuclear bag fiber and this is nuclear chain fiber. Nuclear bag fiber have a primary efferent or group 1A fiber and it also on the nuclear chain fiber. Then group 2 fibers only terminate on the nuclear chain fiber. So others are the motor innervation of the muscle spindle. We discuss in the later part of the presentation. Now the second is efferent innervation or motor fibers. Muscle spindle have motor nerve supply. These are called gamma motor neurons. Gamma efferent endings terminate on the peripheral contractile part of the intrafusal muscle fibers. They have two endings, plate endings and trail ending. Plate endings end mainly on the nuclear bag fiber called dynamic gamma efferent. Dynamic response, it are responsible for dynamic response. Trail endings and mainly on nuclear chain fiber called static gamma efferent and they are responsible for static response. So as we see the motor supply dynamic gamma efferent has a plate ending Static gamma is trail ending, and they are mainly terminate on nuclear chain fiber, and the dynamic gamma efferent terminate on nuclear bag fiber. Okay, now the spindle response. What is spindle response? So there is a two type of spindle response: dynamic response and static response. Dynamic response is discharge most rapidly if the muscle is sudden stretched in nuclear bag region. Example is length of the velocity of lengthening of the muscle. Static response less rapid or not during sustained stretch in nuclear chain fiber. Example is change in muscle length at a maintained stretch. डायनेमिक रिस्पॉन्स के अंदर क्या होता है कि जब वी आर पुट ए रैपिड स्ट्रेच, सडन स्ट्रेच के रिस्पॉन्स के अंदर ये वर्क करता है, और इसके ये कब रिस्पॉन्ड करता है? जब वेलोसिटी ऑफ लेंथिंग ऑफ मसल होती है. स्टैटिक रिस्पॉन्स लेस रैपिडली, या बोल सकते हैं सस्टेन स्ट्रेच, मतलब जो कंटिन्यूस स्ट्रेच जो लग रहा है मसल पे उसके लिए रिस्पॉन्स करती है स्टैटिक रिस्पॉन्स. ओके, सो न्यूक्लियर, so now the sensory 1A fiber and 2A fiber, the velocity is more in the 1A fiber than type 2 fiber because of their large in diameter. So main sensory supply in the intrafusal muscle fiber is type 1A fiber, type 1A efferent. Now the function of muscle spindle. It role in stretch reflex, as we seen previously. Whenever muscle stretch, it can cause contraction of muscle. Whenever muscle stretch, which intact nerve supply reflex it contract. When okay, role in maintaining muscle tone, feedback device that control muscle length, and damping function that can cause smoothing of contraction. Now, as we see in this chart or this graph, there is a two type of graph. The A graph is represent in a normal, the A graph is seen in normal muscle. What happened there? Force of contraction is smooth in the normal muscle, as we see. And if the denervation of muscle spindle, the force of contraction is low, high, मतलब unsmooth. Or in the A graph, we see the contraction is smooth. In the B graph, the contraction is unsmooth because of absence of muscle spindle. So muscle spindle स्मूदिंग के अंदर हेल्प करता है कॉन्ट्रैक्शन की स्मूदिंग के अंदर. मसल स्पिंडल को कट कर दे, हटा दे, तो जितना ज़्यादा इनपुट लग रहा है, जितना कम ज़्यादा इनपुट लग रहा है, उसी के अपोजिट या उसी के रिस्पॉन्स में कम या ज़्यादा कॉन्ट्रैक्शन होगा. और अगर मसल स्पिंडल प्रेजेंट है तो इनपुट कितना भी ज़्यादा लगे पर कॉन्ट्रैक्शन एक स्मूथ लाइन के अंदर ही आता है. सो दी help in smoothing of muscle contraction. Role in voluntary muscle, role in voluntary movement. Okay, mechanism of muscle contraction in response to muscle stretch. So there is a mechanism of muscle contraction. They have two mechanism of muscle contraction. First is response to muscle stretch. Firstly, when stretch of muscle spindle, it can result in stretch of muscle spindle as intrafusal fiber are present in the parallel with muscle fiber or extrafusal muscle fiber. Distortion of primary sensory ending located at the center of nuclear bag fiber. Generation of action potential in 1A efferent fiber. Stimulation of alpha motor neuron in the spinal cord as 1A fiber directly terminate on alpha motor neuron in spinal cord, and it can cause muscle contraction. Now the second mechanism is This mechanism is direct contraction of muscle by the stretching. Now the second mechanism is muscle contraction is response to stimulation of gamma motor neuron. First, the activation of gamma motor neuron by the descending pathway. It can cause contraction of peripheral part of muscle spindle, as peripheral part contain contractile protein and innervated by gamma motor neurons. Stretching of central part of muscle. Now the distortion of primary sensory ending located at the center of nuclear bag fiber, generation of action potential in 1A efferent fiber. Now the stimulation alpha motor neuron in the spinal cord, as 1A fiber directly terminate on alpha motor neuron in spinal cord and it can cause contraction. We see this mechanism through a diagram. So there is a one diagram. This is spinal cord. Okay. Or there is muscle spindle. These are intrafusal muscle fiber. These are extrafusal muscle fibers. When sensory endings, 1A endings are directly stretched, when muscle stretched, 1A sensory efferent are stimulated and it go through the dorsal root of spinal cord to the spinal cord, and then direct termination of alpha motor neuron can cause contraction of muscle. But in the second mechanism, what happened? The gamma motor neuron, by descending pathway through the higher brain center, it can stimulate alpha motor neuron. Gamma motor neurons also stimulate alpha motor neuron. Now, this is the ascending pathway, or there is alpha motor neuron. It can present on peripheral part of the spindle. So, this is gamma motor neuron. This is descending pathway. What happened? Descending pathway activate gamma motor neuron. It can cause stretching of muscle. Contraction of muscle. Whenever contraction of muscle, 1A fiber stimulated, and it can cause directly stimulation of alpha motor neuron and contraction will occur. So this is by 1A fiber to alpha motor neuron. This is direct pathway. By activation of gamma motor neuron, then 1A fiber and then gamma motor neuron is indirect pathway of muscle contraction. Now the effect of stretch and stimulation of gamma motor neuron on spindle activity. There is what happened in this condition. As we see in this diagram, there is a muscle spindle in center, extrafusal fiber in the parallel to the muscle spindle, and the green fiber is afferent fiber. Now in the resting muscle, what happened? The impulses in afferent fibers are less, and in stretch muscle increase afferent discharge. When gamma efferent stimulation increase afferent discharge, as we see in previous diagram, and then muscle stretch plus gamma stimulation further increase in afferent discharge. Afferent discharge को gamma afferent stimulation is also increase afferent discharge, as we see in this previous diagram or previous slides. So this is increased there in previous slides. Now the control of gamma efferent discharge. Gamma motor neuron are regulated by descending tracts originating in area of the brain that also control alpha motor neurons. So the brain area, which is the area bulboreticular facilitatory sense region of brainstem. It can regulate the descending tracts of alpha or gamma motor neuron. In Jendraske's maneuver, proprioceptive input from the hand activate the supraspinal center, which increase gamma efferent discharge. Gamma efferent discharge increases by stimulating the descending pathway. So what is Jendraski's maneuver? Jendraski's maneuver, it can increase stretch reflex by clenching of teeth or hooking fingers. It can increase gamma activity, causing increased sensitivity of muscle spindle. Gamma efferent discharge can cause sensitivity of muscle spindle, indirectly activate spindle, and activate 1A stimulate alpha motor neuron, extraphyseal fiber muscles are contract. So it can help in contraction of the muscle. Anxiety also increase gamma efferent discharge. At the time of anxiety also gamma efferent discharge increases. So through the detection of efferent discharge we can detect the neurological condition. We have some idea about that. Now the alpha gamma coactivation, the descending pathway that stimulate alpha motor neuron also stimulate the gamma motor neurons. Increase gamma efferent discharge also increase alpha motor neuron discharge. This is called alpha gamma coactivation. As we see in this diagram, the descending pathway for alpha motor and gamma motor neurons are same and they are innervated in the spinal cord. The alpha motor neuron innervated on extrafusal muscle fiber and gamma motor neuron innervated in muscle spindle. Significance of alpha gamma coactivation is regulate the sensitivity of the spindle by keeping its length constant. Now the Golgi tendon organ site, tendon of skeletal muscle in series with muscle fibers. So we see the extrafusal muscle fiber, intrafusal muscle fiber are parallel to the extrafusal muscle fiber, but the tendon is in this. So these is muscle fiber, these are muscle fiber, and the tendon in series with these muscle fiber. The structure are encapsulated sensory receptors, 6 to 20 elastic fibers. Third is innervation. Type 1B efferent fibers. As we see, the type 1B efferent fibers are innervation of the sensory innervation of the Golgi tendon organ. Golgi tendon organ are also receptor for inverse stretch reflex. Type 1B efferent fibers terminate indirectly on alpha motor neuron via interneuron. Now the function of Golgi tendon organ. GTOs stimulated by increased muscle tension caused by passive overstretch or active contraction. So what is passive overstretch? Passive overstretch by putting external pressure on your muscle, और एक्टिव कॉन्ट्रैक्शन ऑफ द मसल. और जो एक्टिव कॉन्ट्रैक्शन होता है, जो मसल का कॉन्ट्रैक्शन है, उसके थ्रू ये स्टिमुलेट होती है. एफरेंट फाइबर इज 1B फाइबर. सो नाउ द सेंट्रल पोर्शन और स्पाइनल कॉर्ड, दे हैव 2 interneuron. Inhibitory interneuron inhibit the alpha motor neuron supplying the same muscle, and excitatory interneuron excite the alpha motor neuron supplying the antagonistic muscle. So what is antagonistic muscle? Antagonistic muscle pair as one muscle contract and other is relax. Agonist is muscle that contracting, antagonist is muscle that is relaxing or lengthening. Whenever we put a dumbbell on our hand and flex the elbow, what happens? The biceps muscle is contracted, and in the response their antagonistic muscle, tricep muscle, is relaxed. So this is the example of inhibitory interneurons, or this is a major function of Golgi tendon organ. So these interneuron are also called Golgi bottle neuron. The response, relaxation of same muscle, contraction of muscle. Now the response of muscle spindle is, Golgi tendon organ is relaxation of same muscle, contraction of antagonistic group of muscle, and role in reverse stretch reflex. So we understand this diagram. There is a muscle. In the peripheral part of muscle, there is a tendon present on this part of muscle. This is Golgi tendon organ. Whenever Golgi tendon organ have excess tension, it can stretch. What happen? Sensory nerve fiber 1A, 1B fiber stimulate, and it can go through the dorsal root ganglion into spinal cord, and it can stimulate inhibitory interneuron, and inhibitory interneuron inhibit the alpha motor neuron, and it can result in relaxation response. It can result in relaxation of muscle fibers. So this is inverse stretch reflex. So this is the example of inverse stretch reflex. Now the comparison of muscle stretch and strong active contraction on GTO activity. There is no impulses from relaxed muscle and maximum impulses from contracted muscle. So this is the activity. There is no impulses in the relaxed muscle as we see, and contracted muscle there is maximum impulses. जो गोल्जी टेंडन ऑर्गन है वो मेनली एक्सेसिव और स्ट्रॉन्ग स्ट्रेच के लिए ही रिस्पॉन्ड करता है या फिर कॉन्ट्रैक्शन के लिए, ठीक है. सो दिस इज कैन इन द रिलैक्स्ड मसल देयर इज नो इम्पल्सेस, इन द कॉन्ट्रैक्टेड मसल देयर इज maximum impulses. Now the summary of muscle spindle and Golgi tendon organs. The variable first is location. Muscle spindle present in belly of muscle, this muscle, and Golgi tendon organ present in myotendinous junction. And second is location related to the skeletal muscle fiber or extrafusal muscle fiber. Muscle spindle present in parallel to the extrafusal muscle fiber. Golgi tendon organ present in the series of the muscle fibers. Sense, monitor or detect. Muscle spindle detect the muscle length, and Golgi tendon organ detect the muscle tension. Muscle response, reflective muscle action. Muscle spindle respond reflective muscle action. Golgi tendon organ respond reflective muscle relaxation. So now the efferent, next is efferent nerve fiber. Muscle spindle have 1A efferent fiber, Golgi tendon organ have 1B efferent fiber. Now the efferent nerve fiber, gamma. Muscle spindle have gamma motor neuron, and Golgi tendon organ are alpha motor neuron. But in the muscle contraction, the final common pathway or final common motor neuron is alpha motor neuron. It can cause contraction of overall the muscle fibers. So now the activated reflex. Activated reflex. Now the activated reflex is stretch reflex in the muscle spindle and inverse stretch reflex in Golgi tendon organ. So these are some reference of this presentation, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys understand the muscle spindle and Golgi tendon organ. If any question, comment, and thank you for your valuable time.